okay, hon?
Oh, yeah.
You sure?
What would you say the streets of Kensington is like?
Streets of Kensington is like a third world country out here. Third world country. Different.
Philadelphia.
And now it's like everybody's just stepping on top of each other, trying not to drown.
Philadelphia is running low on more than shelter. It's running low on emotional reserves. People like to say Philadelphia is where American freedom took its first breath, but freedom looks very different when you're trying to sleep on the sidewalk a few blocks from Independence Hall. Some neighbors lost their footing when the factories shut down. Others watched their lives unravel when fentanyl swept through Kensington. And somehow, in one of the wealthiest nations on earth, for every 5 unhoused people, nearly 1 is sleeping outside, according to 2024 numbers. Every January, when the city counts its homeless population, the tally rises like a slow, steady tide. In 2024, officials recorded 591 people without stable housing. Of those, 976 men and women were weathering the cold under bridges and train stations and in tents along sidewalks that once hosted parades. It's not just a headline anymore. It's the new backdrop of city life. So when did sleeping outdoors become normal in the cradle of American liberty? And more urgently, how can a country that builds billion-dollar stadiums still fall short on building enough beds for its own residents? Housing has turned into a high-stakes race. A recent report shows 14 ZO70 housing units in Philadelphia are missing a working kitchen or functioning plumbing, a crisis tucked inside the crisis hidden in plain sight. The truth is hard to digest. Rents keep climbing, averaging about $1,750 a month for a 1-bedroom, while most social assistance checks top out around $967. The math doesn't shout, it just quietly pushes people off the map. Kensington, once a blue-collar neighborhood, now accounts for roughly a third of Philadelphia's homeless population, a place where hope is handed out like low-cost pills, and ambulance sirens often replace lullabies. Yet even amid those stark numbers, there are still sparks of humanity that force us to ask, are we going to see people as a problem to be moved along, or as neighbors who need an open door? Because honestly, when budgets are squeezed and rents soar, that whole personal choice narrative starts sounding a little too convenient. Still, there is a way forward if we're willing to face things head-on, speak plainly, and move quickly from eviction prevention and rental support to long-term supportive housing. And the truth is, this story isn't just about them on some distant corner. It's about us right here and right now in Philadelphia, one city woven into the larger story of homeless in America. This content is shared for education and community awareness. It does not aim to blame, promote, or attack any individual group or organization.
It's like a concentration camp.
Say that one more
It's like a
time.
concentration camp.
Concentration
Population
camp
control.
out here?
They get you fucking hooked and trapped out here. It's lawless, and they don't never give a fuck what happens to you. As long as you're here,
Philadelphia, the city of promises. We're struggling to keep. Here's the question that keeps looping in my mind like a chorus. If a city founded on the idea of equality can't keep its own people safely housed, what hope does that leave for the rest of the country? Walk through Kensington today, and you'll see the crisis in plain view. Community outreach groups estimate that about 35% of Philadelphia's unsheltered residents are concentrated right there in that neighborhood. The opioid emergency has only intensified the situation. Overdose incidents have climbed again in 2025, especially from synthetic substances that leave people unresponsive for hours on the sidewalk. People talk about cleaning up the streets, but what does that actually mean, pushing people out of sight or helping them stand back up?
I've saved a couple of lives. I've seen a shooting, stopped the stabbing.
At the same time, city leaders highlight billions of dollars going into new downtown projects, gleaming hotels, and record tourism numbers. How can both of those stories be true at once? And on top of that, shelters are filled to capacity nearly every night. Project Home. The city's largest provider reports that demand for beds has jumped almost 18% this winter alone. Outreach teams share heartbreaking scenes: older adults slumped in wheelchairs, waiting in the cold. Mothers holding their children close, turned away because every bed is already taken. And still new encampments appear along the L tracks, just as fast as the city clears the old ones.
Are you okay, hon?
It's easy to stroll through Center City and convince yourself everything is fine. The bright lights, the music, the polished storefronts create a comforting illusion of progress that hides the suffering only a few blocks away. But Philadelphia's struggles don't stop at one neighborhood. They're a reflection of a bigger pattern, a mirror held up to the entire country and to the wider reality of homeless in America. Maybe the real question isn't, why can't we fix Kensington, but why do we keep acting like this is acceptable? Philadelphia, America's mirror, the two faces of the city. Philadelphia isn't just telling its own story anymore, it's telling America's story. This city reflects our contradictions. Billions are poured into luxury development, while outreach teams scramble to keep basic services running. City ordinances are passed to address encampments, but the pace of building truly supportive housing falls far behind the need. On paper, the budget lines up neatly. On the streets, lives are anything but orderly. It's strange how the numbers always seem to work except the ones that count human beings. Talk to longtime residents and you can hear the fatigue. A retired teacher told me, "We used to call this the city of brotherly love. Now it feels like everyone's just trying to survive." She's right. The compassion that once defined this place feels like it's slipping, replaced by policies that treat poverty as an inconvenience instead of a national alarm. Meanwhile, leaders keep pointing to strong job numbers, as if that alone guarantees dignity. Does it? What kind of strength allows people to work full-time and still sleep in their cars? A veteran in South Philly once said, "I could serve overseas, but I can't win a fight with my landlord." That sentence stays with me. It's not about laziness, it's about arithmetic. Wages simply haven't kept pace with housing costs. What stings even more is how ordinary this all seems now. We drive past 10 encampments as if they're just another part of the cityscape. But they're not scenery, they're signals. Every sleeping bag under a bridge is a story of policies that missed the mark and promises that never materialized. So maybe the question isn't whether the American dream is broken, but who it truly reached in the first place. Because in Philadelphia, you can still see the flag waving over City Hall, but beneath it, too many people are silently waving for help. And the mirror doesn't sugarcoat anything. Philadelphia shows us what happens when empathy becomes optional, and it asks whether we still recognize the face of homeless in America looking back at us and what we're willing to do about it. When compassion comes into focus, a reflection on homelessness in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, when the city's coordinated service network can still point to more than 75 providers working side by side to make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring, yet we watch the number of people living outside keep rising. There's a tension here we can't ignore. It's a moment where hope and heartbreak sit right next to each other. For anyone who has walked through Kensington, it's impossible to miss the stark reality of people surviving in the margins, a sharp contrast to the lively nightlife just a few blocks away. And even with all that weight, there are still small, steady glows of humanity that remind us we haven't completely given up on each other. Think of the Project HOME outreach teams moving through encampments, not just to complete a headcount, but to build relationships working from the belief that none of us are home until all of us are home. Or the city's Office of Homeless Services, pushing forward new winter shelter expansions and coordinating across multiple agencies, street outreach teams, behavioral health responders, emergency shelters. These aren't just services, they are acts of recognition, quiet ways of saying, you still matter, you are not erased. Yet we still have to ask, why does the kindness struggle to keep up with the scale of the crisis? Because even as more people receive help, the numbers show us the gap is widening. Homelessness in Philadelphia rose by nearly 10% between 2023 and 2024, and the number of people living unsheltered increased by more than 38% over that same stretch of time. This reality, often woven into walking tours and local news segments, highlights neighborhoods where seeing people in distress, wrestling with addiction, mental health issues, or sheer poverty has become all too routine. That widening gap calls not just for charity, but for deep structural change, especially in the broader story of homeless in America. Do we settle for the idea that the miracle lies only in small acts of compassion? Or do we insist on changing the systems that keep people outside in the first place? On the ground, the honest answer is both. A volunteer offering a blanket or a hot drink at midnight matters profoundly. At the same time, building truly affordable housing in a state where there were fewer than 40 rental homes affordable and available for every 100 extremely low-income households in Pennsylvania matters on an even larger scale. So yes, as older Americans, as people who have watched cities rise, fall, and reinvent themselves, we can hold two truths at once. The kindness that flickers in side streets matters deeply, and still, it will never be enough without bold policy and the determination to insist that everyone deserves a safe place to sleep every single night. In the quiet glow of a Philadelphia movie night when the skyline shines but the sidewalks are far from empty, we're reminded that freedom isn't only about the right to speak or vote. It's about having 4 walls a bed and the chance to wake up without fear. In that sense, Philadelphia could yet lead, not just in metrics or budget charts, but in redefining what it means for a city to say, we saw you, you matter, you belong. Because until that promise rings true for every man, woman, and child, without a home in Philadelphia and across homeless in America, the larger promise of this country is still unfinished. Nameless Faces, the hidden story of Philadelphia's homeless crisis. In the narrow alleys and side streets of Philadelphia, you don't just pass a faceless silhouette, You see cheeks reddened by the cold, shaking hands wrapped around a thin blanket and distant eyes belonging to people who once had homes, routines, and neighbors just like us. Take Mr. J, 68, a former sailor who spent years working along the Delaware River. After a traumatic brain injury left him unable to hold a job, and with benefits that arrived too late and too small, he realized he no longer had a place he could truly call home. On a freezing night in 2024, city officials counted about 976 people living outdoors in Philadelphia, a 38% increase from the year before. Mr. J was one of those counted. Then there's Ms. L, a single mother who once worked as a receptionist in an office building not far from Philadelphia's downtown homeless shelters. When rent surged while her paycheck did not, she found herself turning to the shelter system. Every morning she gets up at 5 a.m., takes her child to school, and then returns to the shelter, the place her daughter now calls home, at least for the moment. She told me my little girl asks, "Mom, when are we going back to a real home?" That question lingers in the air. If a child in a city with more than 250 years of history has to ask that, are we truly living up to our ideals? And then there's Mr. M, 24, a recent college graduate who once dreamed of building a career as a software engineer. When the startup he worked for collapsed, he lost his job, slipped into depression, and eventually became addicted to fentanyl. Now he sits under an I-95 overpass in an area often referred to as a homeless street in Philadelphia, where outreach workers and officials conduct counts of people without shelter. He told me, on those days sitting outside, I felt like I was only skin and bones and a little bit of hope. His suffering isn't simply the result of bad choices. It's the story of someone who slipped through every gap in the safety net. When we talk about Philadelphia's homeless crisis, he's part of the living evidence, one more thread in the wider tapestry of homeless in America. Through these three lives, an older veteran, a single mother, and a young professional, we catch a reflection of ourselves, the so-called nameless individuals, who are actually seen every day, but rarely truly acknowledged. They are not statistics. They're our neighbors' classmates from long ago, someone's parent or child. They have names past and future hopes, but the system left them with no space to stand. And I can't help asking if we, as an older generation, have watched different versions of the American dream play out what makes us accept a version where Mr. J, Ms. L, and Mr. M are left behind. Is the measure of a nation's justice the number of people who own homes, or the number of people who still have to search for a safe place to sleep tonight? When we walk past them on the sidewalk, part of us whispers, "That's not me," but another part quietly admits, "That could be me if a few things went wrong." And that's the sobering truth. These nameless faces are not separate from us. They are us in a mirror. We don't always want to face in a country still wrestling with what homeless in America really says about who we are. Homeless on Philadelphia streets, a personal view. I have to admit, when I see the 2024 point-in-time count, showing 191 people without homes in Philadelphia, including 180 who are chronically homeless, I can't just shrug and move on. When we say homeless people, I want to ask straight out, are we really seeing the human beings living at the edge of our everyday lives? Or are we turning away because it feels too painful to look? What hits me hardest is that nearly 19% of Philadelphia's homeless residents are unsheltered, sleeping on sidewalks and parks, under bridges in places never meant for anyone to live. In some neighborhoods, especially along certain Philadelphia streets, Drugs are everywhere, making simple survival even harder. Meanwhile, the city proudly highlights its A+ credit rating and strong economic growth, while countless people live unseen under glowing billboards and sleek digital screens. That contrast feels deeply wrong, and it mirrors the wider story of homeless in America. These men and women are not the problem. They're our neighbors carrying hopes, regrets, and memories like the rest of us. The Philadelphia drug and homelessness crisis isn't just about substances. It's about staying alive in a landscape that offers far too little safety or hope. If home and safety truly matter, then we have to act, not just care in theory. Conclusion: when compassion looks back at us, in the dark corners of Kensington, you can still find small beams of light groups like Project HOME, Broad Street Ministry, and City Outreach, helping people heal, regain stability, and start over. Tiny homes and supportive housing offer more than shelter. They restore dignity and a sense of belonging. These efforts prove compassion isn't gone. It grows when we act together and refuse to accept homeless in America as normal. Every outreach shift, every new housing program, every investment in health and rent support helps rewrite our story. Homelessness isn't fate. It's the result of a cracked system, and we have the power to fix it.